So next up, we have Dr. Bridget Turaga. She's the Strategic Advisor for Partnerships in the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate at the NSF. She develops and nurtures TIPS partnerships with industry, philanthropy, and other government agencies, both domestic and international, on a range of priority topics, including, surprising to me, quantum technology, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, advanced telecommunications, and critical minerals. In addition, she plans key roles in the design stage of new programs, which was announced somewhat recently, NSF X Labs, to the first National iChallenge, iCorp's cohort, for quantum applications, and Stride Ventures Tech Metal Transformation Challenge. From 2019 to 2023, she served as a program director at the NSF Office of International Science and Engineering, covering research, security, and cooperation with India, South Korea, China, and Taiwan. Prior to joining NSF, Bridget was the Global Strategy Unit Chief on the China desk at the State Department and the China Director at the White House National Security Council. Bridget holds a PhD in biology from MIT and a bachelor's from Brown University. Please get a round of applause for Bridget Turaga.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Bridget Turaga. Thank you, Jeff, for the invitation and the excellent introduction. It's great to be here with some fellow funders, either future or either current fellow funders or future, using your platform now that we know about it, as well as with researchers and founders to have a dynamic discussion in some ways about what's working and what's not working and where we can be innovating both as researchers and as funders. All right, so I'm coming from the U.S. National Science Foundation, and I'm just going to give you a little bit of background on our agency. We are a sister agency to the National Institutes of Health. We have a budget of about $9 billion a year to fund researchers all around the country. We don't have any of our own labs. It's all extramural research. And the mission was set out in the NSF Act of 1950, and we have been following it ever since. So our mission is to promote the progress of science, to advance the national health, prosperity, and welfare, and to secure the national defense. And you'll see two key parts to this mission. First is that we are supporting fundamental science. That is really the foundation of what we do, but also that we're driving towards impact. You are using taxpayer dollars. We've got to have great benefits to U.S. society, to the U.S. economy, to health, national defense, et cetera. Our agency has been around for 76 years, and we fund all areas of science except for the biomedical science at the National Institutes of Health funds. So Joni already talked about what NCATS and NSF funds, and so we are their sister agency, but we fund biology, we fund computer science, we fund chemistry, physics, geosciences, all areas of science. And as of about 4 years ago, through the CHIPS and Science Act, Congress created a new part of the National Science Foundation. It was the first directorate to be created in over 3 decades, called Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships. And this is based on the recognition that there's awesome research being done in research institutes and startups all around the country, but that research is not always getting translated to the maximum impact that it could have. And so we built this new directorate. It's 4 years old now, and it works all across the National Science Foundation. So all of the research that has been funded over the last 76 years by all other parts of NSF, which portions of that are really ripe to have a broader impact? Which portions of that should be driving towards influencing global standards in technology? Which parts can contribute to open source ecosystems, sharing of positive and negative data, and which parts of it are ready for commercialization? And we also recognize that now times are different, right? The scientific enterprise is changing. We have cool tools like AI, which enable a number of things that we've heard about today. So how do we meet the moment? How do we meet this changing landscape? How do we recognize that researchers today truly want to have impact in a bigger way. And I'm speaking to a group that's focused on having impact on human health, so you know this quite well. I'm also a neuroscientist, a biologist by training, and if I'm honest, when I was an undergraduate deciding why I wanted to go to grad school, it was because I wanted to look under a microscope and see green fluorescent protein, GFP, move. Or I wanted to see calcium imaging happening in live cells and be able to stimulate the cells and see them react. And that was super cool to me. And I was going to be happy, at least in the first couple of years of my PhD, just tinkering in dark rooms with living cells and microscopes. But that's not really what the generation today is motivated by. Scientists are motivated by having a bigger worldly impact. And eventually I became motivated by having a bigger impact as well. And my research went on to help find drugs for a mouse model of autism, and now I'm doing things much broader as well. But we've got to meet the moment and see where scientists are. We also need to be leveraging partnerships. One government agency with a budget of a little bit of $9 billion is not going to, be able to alone have this type of impact that we need to on our research enterprise. We need to be working with state and local governments. We need to be collaborating with other U.S. government agencies. We need to be thinking about philanthropy, thinking about how our activities might be synergistic with ResearchHub's activities. And so these kinds of partnerships and this broader awareness is really also critical today. And so with the establishment of the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate, the TIP Directorate, we thought about catalyzing a paradigm expansion. So it's not just that you develop something in the research lab in isolation, and then you push that idea out into the world. There has to be crosstalk between folks who have problems that need solutions and folks who think they have solutions. So there has to be that lab push, but also the market pull. And these communities should be talking regularly. We should be hearing from scientists, or we should be hearing from communities who don't know if their water is clean and have trouble testing their water. Then technologists and scientists can come up with solutions for those real-world problems. And that's a little bit about what we think about and prioritize as we're designing new programs in the Technology, Innovation, and Partnerships Directorate. Now, NSF has traditionally funded fundamental research all the way on the left of this kind of lab to society or lab to market spectrum. And this is the valley of death that you've heard about, right? Where there's a good deal of public funding on the left-hand side. And if you make it all the way to the other side, you've got venture capital ready to take your product to market. But what happens in between? Many scientists, many ideas get stuck in this valley of death. So how can we be creating a variety of different pathways? So depending upon what kind of science and technology you have or what kind of solution your challenge needs, we can be building bridges across this valley of death. And so we do so through funding opportunities that folks in the United States can apply to. And we think of our funding opportunities in terms of three core areas that fit under the mission of TIP, and the mission being to work across NSF with ongoing research investments to drive research and innovation across all areas of science and engineering fields, to foster U.S. competitiveness, economic growth, health, prosperity, and the general welfare, as we talked about as part of the broader NSF mission. And I'm going to talk about a number of our funding opportunities. It's just a small number of them, but hopefully it gives you a flavor for the types of work that we are prioritizing, the types of things that we're funding, and they fit into three main buckets. The first is accelerating research from lab to society. That's where I'll spend most of my time today. The second is about building innovation ecosystems, that it's not just one lab working in isolation, but we need academics with a vibrant startup community and communities that have the problems, industry that wants to solve them but needs some of that fundamental research, all working together in that ecosystem. And then, of course, we also need talent. Who are the people? Who are the folks who are actually going to do the great work? And so we have a critical role to play in skilling, upskilling, reskilling, educating that workforce. And so here's one of our programs. It's called Translation to Practice. So this is for folks who have been doing great research in the lab and want to take one of those first steps to getting it out of the lab into the real world. They want to be able to build those partnerships, potentially license technology, and they want to get some of that initial funding. There are 3 tracks to this. If you already have an NSF grant, you can apply to the Explore track to take those first steps. If you don't have an NSF grant, but you have a better idea, you're doing that use-inspired research already, we're moving on your way, we have a Translate track. And then if you have a partner, if you have someone who can help you potentially commercialize that research, we have the Partner track. You can be working on technology or science projects in any area of science and engineering and apply to our TTP funding opportunity. We have 3 deadlines a year, so there's also plenty of opportunities. We're also looking for other U.S. government agencies or other funders to come and join us to co-fund some projects through here. We have 2 relationships with the Department of Defense that they will come and co-fund projects that help with specific missions, and we welcome other agencies to join us or philanthropies to join us as well. We also have our Innovation Core program or our I-Core program. So if you're at a university, you're a faculty member, a graduate student, a postdoc, and you've got a cool idea, but you're not quite sure if there's a real market for it, then this is the program for you. It puts you through a 7-week intensive entrepreneurial training experience. Has anyone here done I-Core or been an I-Core coach? All right, we've got a handful of folks who've participated who you could ask about it. So the key to this is that you have to do interviews with 100 potential customers to find out what challenge do they face, what's the bottleneck, what's really irking them, what could make their life easier, their experience better, to really find out then how can you shape your technology to be meaningful to the market? What is your first market going to be there? And you work on developing a business plan with some intensive coaching as you work towards this. So this is a great program. It gives $50,000 to folks that they can use to travel. It's usually done in a team of 3 people, including an industry mentor, to again take those first steps to get your idea out of the lab closer to impact. So the first couple of opportunities that I've talked about are individual research teams working on them, but we have a number of programs that think more act more at the institution level. So let's say you are a strong U.S. research institute, but you don't have a tech transfer office, or you have one, but it only has half an FTE in it, and you could really develop more capacity to help your community get ideas out of the lab. That's where the Accelerating Research Translation Program might be a great fit for you to develop that institutional capability, that capacity to get ideas out of the lab closer to the market. And we have another new program that was announced this spring called AI Ready America. So we've got plenty of AI tools, but does everyone around the country have equal access to them or really know which AI tool is going to be best for their uses? And so here we are developing a network of 56 hubs around the country. So every state and territory will have an AI Ready America hub there to do coordination activities in its state and to make sure that if you are a local business and you want to get trained on the latest AI tools or you want access to some of them, that you have a coordination hub to go to with that expertise. If you're a state and local government and you want to get AI savvy, that you also have a place to go and a resource. So this program is not about developing the latest AI tools, but recognizing that there are a lot of tools out there already, but how do we ensure that small businesses and local government can get access to them? Okay, and we heard today about open data, open systems, AI-ready data as well. We have a cool new program. The awardees will be announced later this summer as part of this network of self-driving labs. These are programmable labs. The first cohort of labs is going to be in biology, chemistry, as well as in material science. You can imagine that there are labs all around the country that might have some awesome equipment, but it's not being utilized full-time. So maybe you've got like state-of-the-art equipment in your lab, but it's only being used 2 hours a day. What if we could get a lot of that equipment around the country online so that more folks could have access to it? What if we combined it with robotics and with new AI tools to make equipment available, to make some of these self-driving lab facilities, to democratize access to awesome infrastructure that the US government's probably already purchased along the way? And then how do we ensure that the data that's coming out of these labs is AI ready, that we can make it open source to the extent that that makes sense for the scientists' purposes, that negative and positive results can all be made available, and that we can see comparisons across different experiments because the data is being pooled together. So we've got this great network of programmable cloud labs that will be launched later this summer. So stay tuned for that and see what equipment you've never had access to before that you might now have access to through this initiative. Okay, so most of the programs that I've talked about so far, you can apply, you can be working in any area of science. But we do also have a few programs that are dedicated to a specific area of science, and I'll highlight a couple of the biology ones today. So we are supporting a cohort on advancing cell-free systems. So of course we can be manufacturing things, in yeast, in cells, but there is also some simplicity to doing it in cell-free systems. But to date, it's been prohibitively expensive. So how can we be developing some platform technologies to allow folks to do things in cell-free systems in a way that might actually be affordable? And so we've funded companies as well as universities and folks who are partnering together to come and develop the next generation of cell-free systems. Another biology-specific one is related to use-inspired acceleration of protein design, and specifically the design of enzymes. And again, this is a focused program. We launched both of these programs with an Ideas Lab, which is a week-long event that brings together a variety of researchers from companies as well as academia, startups, large and small, to put their heads together, build some partnerships and come up with some ideas, and then submit proposals on how they could be designing the future enzymes. Okay, and quantum was mentioned in my biography. We've got a number of new and exciting quantum initiatives from the US government, broadly speaking, as the executive order on quantum was announced just a few weeks ago, and from the National Science Foundation in particular. So we announced Project Triad. Triad is standing for 3 types of quantum technologies: computing, networking, and sensing. And we have 3 initiatives that we're talking about under this. The National Quantum Virtual Laboratory, which is a program that's been around for a couple of years. We have the NSF X Labs program, which was just launched maybe 6 weeks ago, maybe in the April timeframe, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And then we have a teaser for a program called Quantum Plus X, which doesn't exist yet, but is still in the design phase, where we're thinking about connecting quantum technology to real-world use cases. So, what are the real-world use cases in biotechnology, in the finance sector, in the energy sector, and how do we create pathways for researchers to work directly with experts in those sectors who have those use cases? Maybe Fortune 500 companies in the US, or startups who want to be the first adopters of quantum technology, but they might need researchers who know the details of quantum to be able to come in and partner with them on their use cases together to have a stronger impact. I mentioned the NSF X Labs program, and this kind of fits in the categories of one of our new programs that's experimenting with how we fund science, how we do science, how we incentivize researchers. And so recognizing that that it can take a long time to write grant applications, which was mentioned in our previous presentation. How do we give folks a longer runway of larger amounts of funding so they're not spending as much time writing grants? How do we take away some of the negatives of being in industry, where you might be tied to quarterly earnings, or in academia, where you might have a lot of teaching requirements? How do we create a space for you to come and be part of this new independently acting entity, this new X Labs, to create some awesome platform technology that could really transform a scientific discipline, that could transform an economic sector? And how can we enable folks to put together the dream team to really drive some cool research forward? We have 2 topics that have been announced for X Labs already. One is on quantum systems, and the other is on scientific instrumentation for sensing and imaging. And new topics will be announced in the future. And then as we're trying things differently, we also had a cool new initiative that launched in November called Stride Ventures. And our first challenge was called Tech Metal Transformation, which was basically on taking e-waste and creating it, and not creating the e-waste, but drawing value out of the e-waste. How do you extract critical minerals, valuable materials from e-waste or from waste streams from mining? And how can we have a challenge-like structure to incentivize teams to do this? We had a very short application that was required of researchers. It was a very condensed timeline. After submitting that short application, a subset of 18 teams were flown into Washington, D.C. to give in-person pitches. And it was only at that time that their biosketch and their current and pending support forms were required, not before then. And they gave those in-person pitches, and we made decisions very quickly. So the time from their proposal submission to when you find out you get an award is potentially, at NSF, we'd like to do it within 6 months. And then usually you might have 2-4 weeks until your award starts and you get your money. In this case, we went from receiving proposals to getting money out the door in 53 days. Now, that's not scalable for all of our research programs. It's not going to be applicable to all of our research programs. But for this focused program, it was something that we wanted to pilot. And so we partnered with another agency that had done this before and did this sprint. And then because we're also quite interested in the meta-science side of things, those 18 teams that came in person for their oral pitches, afterwards we invited all of them to come for sort of a debrief interview with folks who had nothing to do with whether they got the awards or not. And we're able to see like the best and worst of this new fast process. And so we're also really committed to, as we're trying these new programs, as we're piloting new ways of funding science, to reflecting back on ourselves in the same way that I feel like Jeff also talked about the best and the worst of what they tried. We as funding agencies, as we're going to try things new, we need to take a rigorous science of science approach to evaluating them and admitting what works, what doesn't work, what's scalable, what's not scalable, so that we can be improving too as the scientific enterprise is moving forward. I'm just going to show one program from each of these other pillars and then take some questions. So, as I mentioned, ecosystems are really critical to the success of the scientific enterprise. It's not sufficient to just be one lab doing your own work. You've got to be talking with the folks who are going to be using your science or your products. You want to be talking with, industry, folks who are going to buy your widget, whatever you're developing. And so one of our flagship programs of the TIP Directorate is the NSF Regional Innovation Engines Program. We have 9 full-scale engines that were part of our first cohort, and we will be announcing our second cohort later this summer. So stay tuned. There might be some that are also in the biomedical technologies kind of area. And these are large-scale investments. So each regional innovation engine will get up to $160 million from the National Science Foundation, and they are often getting at least that much from state governments, combined with industry partners in their area, because they are building this innovation ecosystem. They're bringing the community colleges in, the research-intensive universities in, together with industry to be building this rich place where research can be done and ideas can be translated rapidly, because the whole ecosystem is in touch and working quickly. In our first cohort, we had one that was in the biomedical space. It's in North Carolina, led by Wake Forest University, and it focuses on regenerative medicine. And as I mentioned, we've got our second cohort to be announced soon. We narrowed it down to 15 finalists last year, and stay tuned to find out who's going to get the funding for the next cohort. Okay, and finally, talent is so critical to the scientific enterprise. We have a number of programs that support education, workforce development, talent development. We have one that is an entrepreneurial fellows program. It's called the Activate Anywhere Fellows. So recognizing Activate had been a program that had existed in a few select places like Silicon Valley, but we want to create opportunities for folks who want to be entrepreneurs, who are ready to go off on their own, start their own company, and need that time, that mentorship, and those resources to do so. And so this is a 2-year program with $350,000 in direct support for those activities. And finally, I will just say that the National Science Foundation truly welcomes the opportunity to partner with other funders. Often that is other U.S. government partners or philanthropy, or in a number of cases, it's also large companies that want to help design the research programs of the future and help to select some of those awardees. And so if you are a funder and you want to come and join us in any of the programs I've talked about today, or you want to redesign some new programs, we're quite eager to see how we can meet the moment and spur innovation all across the country to do awesome things. So thanks so much for the opportunity, and happy to take questions.
I wanted to double click a little bit on the partnership potential, especially with companies. So as I alluded to in one of my earlier questions, I've done a lot of development for very large sports and media companies. And some of them have mechanisms by which they could donate their projects that are relevant to medical technology. As an example, if you've ever seen a UFC fight with like the tracking dots on people's bodies and things like this, like those technologies can be far advanced what biotech has for, sit-stand testing. That's just one example. But are there mechanisms by which companies like that have such programs could partner with the NSF to then find a commercialization partner for that kind of technology leveraged in the health domain, this sort of thing?
I think I would have to talk with you a little bit more about what that would look like. I mean, we're usually looking for partners who either have direct dollars that they might contribute, or they have maybe awesome data or compute capabilities or some sort of resources, but then we have an open call. And so that would really be key to it, is that we'd have to agree together that we're going to put out a call for proposals, and that it would be an open call that either, all U.S. universities or all U.S. researchers could be able to apply to help solve that problem. But I would be happy to chat with you more afterwards.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the talk. And I think it's really important what you mentioned about speed. I think that this valley of death, I think it's partially for me like a time that passes. And I was just wondering, you touched a bit on that, but your general thoughts about, especially with AI technologies, and half a year ago, the world was completely different. And if I propose something to do business and then I have to wait 6 months, then I used models that are not relevant at all, and maybe the whole project needs to change entirely. So do you have any thoughts on how we could make it even quicker, especially given that the technology that many of your projects shown are moving so fast?
Yes.
So are there any, you've showed these programs, but maybe anything else you think about?
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, we are really sensitive to the idea that science and technology is moving so quickly now. So we as a funding agency need to move quicker as well. So for the program that I mentioned, one of the reasons why it worked is because we were able to pick the expert, we called them jurors, but the expert merit review panel in advance, because the program was focused enough that we could identify the experts in advance. And then they knew that the moment they got the proposals in their inbox, they only had a few days to read them. And then they needed to be in person to hear the pitches. And so there are cases like that where if you can preload the work. So for us, we spend a significant amount of time finding the very best experts around the world to review the proposals, especially proposals that are quite complicated or that require a mix of expertise. That's where we spend a lot of our time. But to the extent that we can front load some of that is one way that we can do things faster. I think also on our side, we are thinking about what tools do we have at our disposal to be able to move things faster. Because I think that's critical. We've also been significantly understaffed the last year and a half, which has made things a little bit more challenging, but we are hiring up now to be able to move things faster. But speed is key, and we welcome other ideas and how we can streamline things so that things can go faster. In some programs too, we have maybe a pre-proposal before the proposal stage goes in. So our Small Business Innovation Research Program, for example, has a pre-proposal before the proposal stage so that at least you're not writing the full-scale grant proposal before you even find out if you're within scope for a program. And that can also help with the time course as well. But I'm sure there are even more opportunities for us to be more efficient.
Brian Kim from Northwell. Thank you so much for coming and great presentation. We talked a lot about incentives. And
Yes.
As someone who's been in academia his entire career, the incentives in academia are tremendously different from in business and industry. And I love the fact that you're trying to create public-private academic business partnerships. But so far, I know this is a big shift for NSF. Are you seeing that this is happening well and naturally? Or are you seeing certain just immediate tensions because of the cultural differences in terms of how people are wired towards these incentives? Just kind of curious.
Yeah, I would say both. I think we're having both kind of experiences. We do have a promotion and tenure, a project called PTI, which is about promotion and tenure at universities and how some universities are getting ready or have piloted things to see how you can incentivize other behaviors and not make sure that it's not just sort of papers and patents that are only counted, but that there are other ways to count for your promotion and tenure. And certainly, I think we're noticing a big change at the sort of state government level in terms of incentivizing innovation and coming up with other ways. And in some of our ecosystem building programs, like the NSF Engines program, there's a lot of interest at the state level now that they see that there can be awesome economic development that can benefit their state if they create mechanisms that are more friendly for scientists and entrepreneurs. With companies, it can vary, right? Companies are really thinking about their bottom line. They're also thinking about where they can get talent. And so that's in some ways that we've seen it easier to get big companies to buy into working across the ecosystem, to working with community colleges, to working with universities, if they know that they'll soon have a talent pipeline that hasn't been as reliable in the past. We've heard companies tell us that they're considering going overseas to build their next R&D facility because they don't have reliable talent pipeline in certain places in the United States. And they are motivated to then get involved in the ecosystems and talk with the universities and talk with the community colleges if they know that they're going to have the smart, awesome, well-connected, well-trained people in the future.